feature match of today, ladies and gents. It is going to be Flavio del Pidio, aka Pado, versus David Barker, aka Muffrey.
Exactly, and Flavio is someone that we really shouldn't need to introduce, but we'll do our best anyway. There's a few achievements on his rap sheet for VGC. He is the 2019 European International Champion. He's had top 8s at the North American International Championships in 2019 as well as a top 8 in the European International Championships in 2017. And he's also a regional champion from Leipzig in 2018. I'm sure he's had some successes before that as well. And not to mention all of the local tournaments that he'll have attended throughout his VGC career. So absolute pedigree of VGC, and really he, as well as Ed, people like Taran, are players that everybody that follows VGC should look to say, how do I play this game? What sort of things should I be thinking about? And taking his example going forward.
Yeah, 100%. And on to David Barker's side. He is representing Sweden. He's been playing VGC ever since 2016. And also I know him from a Flinch Squad server that we've got a little community going. He's a very consistent player that has been improving over time, which has been really good. And it's been a delight being able to play with him as well. But without any further ado, we're going to go straight into team preview, ladies and gents. We are going to be seeing it from a capture card recording of from Pado's side. So we are going to see Pado actually having Porygon Z, Clefairy, Talonflame, Urshifu, Amoonguss, and Male Indeedee. Whilst on Muffrey's end, we are going to see a very cheeky little fairy in the form of that Azumarill, paired up with Hatterene, Alolan Marowak, female Indeedee, Porygon 2, and Amoonguss, Ben.
Yeah, and Indeedee is something that I do want to touch on, because you've got the male and female versions of that Pokemon, and they do learn different moves, so they are different species. Male Indeedee is a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, and gets access to Trick Room, while female Indeedee is a little bit slower, a little bit more bulky, can take a few more hits, but also gets access to that all-important Follow Me. So female Indeedee tends to be used to set up Trick Room, whereas male Indeedee can be used for a little bit more of offense, maybe setting up Trick Room of its own. But speaking of offense, that's exactly what Flavio is going for this game. Porygon Z, I cannot wait to see just launching out those big max strikes with its adaptability ability. And the big question is whether Flavio is going to be able to stop Muffrey going for his Trick Room mode.
Yeah, exactly, because we've got a couple of Pokemon, I say a couple, quite a few Pokemon on Muffrey's end being able to take advantage of the Trick Room. We have the Marowak, Alolan Marowak, we've got the Hatterene, we've also got the Azumarill, which is mainly known to be quite slow, not very quick, maybe belly drum sets. But regardless, we're actually going to see the leads. It's going to be female Indeedee on Muffrey's end, and the Hatterene or Hatterene, whichever way you want to pronounce it. Whilst we actually see the Nemesis, it's Nemesis of the Indeedee, the male Indeedee, coming up from Flavio's end, paired up with the Amoonguss.
Exactly that, and Psychic Terrain being on the field means that both Indeedee and Hatterene, I'm going to go for Hatterene, are able to use that new move, Expanding Force, which targets both Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field and is boosted in power by Psychic Terrain, as well as being boosted in power by Psychic Terrain. So definitely that Amoonguss on Flavio's side is going to be very much threatened, but maybe here just to launch a Spore into female Indeedee on David Muffrey's side of the field, make sure it goes to sleep and can no longer redirect any attacks onto or away from its partner. But we are seeing turn 1, game 1, we're going for that Hatterene. That is Gigantamax, isn't it?
Yes, that is a gigantic max indeed. Not actually opting for the Trick Room. Altrusimo, which means Helping Hand, is coming up from the female Indeedee, assisting the Hatterene, the G-Max Hatterene, whilst we actually see a Rage Powder. So it all depends on what this Hatterene decides to go for. Exclusiva, which is Imprison, comes up from Flavio's side. So not wanting any expanding forces, or perhaps maybe another move. I'm not sure if that might be paired up with, but we actually see huge amounts of damage from that G-Max Smite on Muffrey's end, being dealt on an Amoonguss, which actually resists that move, whilst both the male Indeedee and Amoonguss are now actually under confusion.
They are, but something that we did miss, that last little bit of text there, I believe that Imprison also stopped the female Indeedee going for that expanding force. So, Indeedee showing what it can do, both probably stopping the Trick Room on Hatterene, not that that's going to matter for the next couple of turns, but also stopping that expanding force going into the Amoonguss. So Flavio deciding to protect himself, but does have to trade a little bit of damage to do so.
Yeah, the Helping Hand actually comes out once again from the female Indeedee, whilst we actually see Expanding Force come out from the male Indeedee this time round. It has imprisoned it, but it can use it all it wants to, whilst Spore does actually come out onto the female Indeedee, which is actually revealed to have safety goggles. Very interesting and correct actual item to be used there, whilst we actually see the Hatterene pick up the KO onto the male Indeedee. So David Barker being able to have a very, very helpful female Indeedee there, isn't that right,
yeah, very, very helpful indeed, and that's going to be a big loss for Flavio in this match. Indeedee was both locking away that expanding force on female Indeedee on Muffrey's side of the field, but also making sure that Trick Room wasn't going up, and Hatterene hasn't taken too much damage yet, and the Follow Me, because of that safety goggles, is still in effect. So Porygon Z coming out here for Flavio, may be able to knock out or almost certainly be able to knock out the Indeedee, certainly be able to knock out the Hatterene, but it will have to survive through the next 2 turns in order to do that. So Flavio going to have to either use its Rage Powder, maybe pivot into another Pokemon that has access to Follow Me or Rage Powder, in order for that Porygon Z to be able to just use that Sky High special attack to be able to knock out Muffrey's Pokemon. But also, it's got a lot of work to do. It's got to get through all 4 Pokemon, while Flavio doesn't have too many Pokemon remaining at the moment.
Yeah, that's very true, and we actually see the final Pokemon revealed on Flavio's end being that Clefairy, switching in for the Amoonguss. The Amoonguss will be benefiting from a Regenerator ability if it does actually carry it. And we actually see the Porygon Z from Flavio taking that huge gargantuan form, very crazy looking form, and saying, listen, I'm about to deal some damage. David, are you about to take it? And we're actually gonna see David saying, listen, I can take it just fine. My female Indeedee is going to be able to redirect it. Max Strike does come out and should be more than enough to pick up the KO onto that female Indeedee, which it definitely does, whilst dropping the Hatterene's speed by 1 stat stage. Doesn't usually affect it because Hatterene usually likes being run in Trick Room, very, very slow. G-Max Smite is going to be able to come out and deal good amount of damage onto the Dynamax Porygon Z, whilst confusing both the Porygon Z and the Clefairy going into turn 3, whilst actually we see the Life Orb recoil coming out from that Hatterene as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't have minded seeing a Max Guard coming out from Porygon Z there, just making sure that it didn't take any more damage. The Hatterene is about to shrink down into its normal form, and the problem with this side on Flavio is that he's had to take Confusion on both of his Pokemon, and we know how that works. It may just miss. Marowak coming in, Alola Marowak, should I say, coming in for Muffrey here, and something that we have seen a little bit is Marowak going for Ally Switch does get access to that now. Especially with Porygon using predominantly normal type moves, Flavio is going to be able to, or is going to have to watch out for that possibility and choose his targets wisely. Now, Clefairy could have access to something like Spotlight. We've seen that in previous formats, and that does make Ally Switch not quite work in the same way. But we'll have to get through this confusion first.
We'll have to get through this confusion, and the Clefairy is able to do so. Does get a Follow Me off, as well as able to redirect it. The Porygon Z does actually connect as well with getting a move off as well. On top of that, does get a Max Strike, which is able to pick up the KO onto David's Hatterene. We didn't actually see an Ally Switch come out. I think if there was that tech, it should have been gone down right there, and it would have really been effective. Life Orb Recoil on the Porygon Z. Whilst we do see a Flare Blitz coming out from the Alola Marowak, it's going to deal huge amounts of damage, not actually pick up the KO, but it is more than likely going to be carrying that Thick Bone, which does double its attack stat by 2. Of course, it does double it. What am I on about? And we are actually going to see the Azumarill come in as David's final Pokemon.
Yeah, I would have really actually liked to see the Clefairy go down there for Flavio. Very good for Muffrey here that the Clefairy didn't go down. That Marowak has had its speed dropped, and if Amoonguss was on the field now, would have to be worrying a lot about the potential of Spore. Of course, Azumarill doesn't like that Amoonguss in the background either, but it is a very good Pokemon for Muffrey to have here. Both Marowak and Azumarill, between Thick Club and Huge Power, do have probably the ability to knock out the Porygon Z. And of course, Flavio has to protect that because it's the only thing on his side of the field that is going to be able to potentially deal with that Marowak.
Ooh, and we actually see the Clefairy get confused and smack itself in the face with that Follow Me hand gesture. Whilst we actually see the Porygon Z does actually go for a Max Darkness and does finish off that Alolan Marowak too. So really good board position right now on Flavio. It's looking like he is in a good position. The Azumarill is still a case because of that confusion. It just misses the KO. So that could have proved to be quite crucial. That Clefairy actually self-inflicting itself with that confusion hit, not being able to move. Whilst we do see the Porygon Z actually undynamax.
Yeah, but I mean, this is exactly where Friend Guard from that Clefairy really comes into its own, and you can see the effect of the combination of Friend Guard as well as boosted HP from its Dynamax form really coming in clutch there for Flavio. We don't know what moves Flavio's Amoonguss has, but it's really quite common for Clefairy not to have attacking moves, so absolutely clutch there for Flavio.
Oh, 100%. And the Clefairy was able to move that turn. It could have been game-ending for Flavio there. If he didn't get that Follow Me off, it is not game-ending. Once again, the Hyper Beam actually being opted. Look at that amazing animation. The best one I've seen in this whole new game. Being able to ensure the KO for Flavio. Give him game 1 as his Porygon Z does actually go down to the Life Orb Recoil, leaving this a very, very desolate battlefield, but in favor of Pado.
Yeah, I really like it when you get to those end games and both Pokemon get knocked out. Obviously, Amoonguss was in the back for Pado, so not a worry on which person wins or loses. There are some calculations and have been some controversy in the back in the day on VGC about how that all shakes out in the end game. But we do see a clear battlefield, 1-0 to Flavio there, and a real example of how all of the parts interacted. You had the Imprison, you had the Friend Guard coming into play, you had the Follow Me coming out, and Rage Powder as well, of course, redirection in 2 places, just making sure that Pado was able to really fire off those big attacks, but also stop Muffrey going for that Trick Room, which he would have absolutely love to be in, especially with the speed drops coming out from Max Strike from that Porygon.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it was a bit crucial as well. We saw the G-Max Smite actually showing why it is such a destructive move when it decides to just cancel out your opponent's move inputs. It's insane because that Clefairy, it's self-inflicted by confusion that one turn. If it hit itself again, should I say, in confusion, that final turn, that Aqua Jet would have been enough to pick up the game potentially for Muffrey if that Clefairy did not have any fighting, any attacking type move. But with that being said, Ben, we're actually going to go straight into Game 2 team preview. Yep. And what do you think about board position right now? What do you think Muffrey should be doing in his space?
I think really the question is whether or not Muffrey can go for a Trick Room strategy or not, given the way that Flavio's team is set up. I don't think he's going to be able to, certainly early game, but maybe if he's able to position a little bit more offensively in the early game, he can go for a late game Trick Room, and I think that's what I'd like to see from Muffrey coming out in this game too. But without further ado, we're going to see what decisions each of these players made. Will we see a switch up, or will we see the same leads as game 1?
Well, we saw them both in very similar colors, same top and same lighthouse behind them in the lead cards. But we're actually going to see a different lead now from Muffrey's end. Amundus and Hatterene. Hatterene's the same, of course. The Psychic Terrain does actually get activated thanks to that male Indeedee Psychic Surge and a Porygon Z switch up as well then.
Yeah, this is actually really quite clever. So you've got the Indeedee wanting to go for both an Expanding Force to knock out that Amoonguss and stop any spores coming out, but you also want it to Imprison to stop a Trick Room. And so the combination with Indeedee and Porygon Z does maybe allow for that to happen, but of course you still have to worry about Rage Powder, because if you go for 2 attacks, maybe Expanding Force and Max Strike or Hyper Beam, depending on how you're feeling at this time, probably Max Strike as the move of choice. You can't Imprison, and therefore you've got this sort of cyclical mind game going on here. We'll have to see. It looks like Flavio's going for some on the offensive here, Dynamaxing almost certainly his Porygon Z here. There it is, looking crazy, coming out onto the field.
It might actually go for a Max Darkness, which could also make sense because it does reduce the special defense stat stage of both the Pokemon. So Expanding Force would be a very good moment if it was actually outspeeding, but it's not. The male Indeedee does move first, does go for that Imprison, making sure no Trick Room is going to be happening and going down during turn 1. And Max Strike, no Rage Powder. That is insane. From David, that Max Strike is more than enough to pick up the KO onto that Hatterene. So bye-bye, Hatterene. You are out of game 2. And a Spore does come out from Amoonguss. Does, of course, 100% of the time land onto the Porygon Z, putting it to sleep and ensuring that at least one sleep turn, one Dynamax turn will be lost thanks to that sleep.
Exactly, and Azumarill coming out here isn't likely to put on the pressure that really Muffrey wants to put on. Of course, a little bit of a mixed bag of a turn for Flavio there, managing to stop the Trick Room in 2 ways, both knocking out the Hatterene and getting that Imprison onto the field, which is also restricting the Expanding Force if Muffrey has brought his own Indeedee to this game. But I think the targeting could have been slightly better for Flavio. Going for that Amoonguss was probably a better target, making sure that the Porygon Z wasn't getting put to sleep for sure, while also making sure the Imprison stopped the Trick Room.
Ooh, and we're actually going to see a Dynamax coming up from David's end. It's got to be this Azumarill. If it's a Amoonguss, I'll be highly impressed and surprised at the same time. Thanks, Phoebe. It is the Azumarill indeed. So the little water-type fairy is actually going to become quite big and raise its hands up saying, listen, I am proclaiming myself Dynamax now. We are going to see the Amoonguss go for a Protect on its end on David, for David's side, whilst the Expanding Force, from what it seems like, is going to be coming out from the male Indeedee, dealing a bit of chip damage onto the Azumarill. Remember, it is Dynamax, so it's not going to be able to suffer that much from some damage. It's actually the Azumarill goes for Max Geyser, doesn't even try to go, wow, look at that damage, doesn't even try to go for Max Starfall to change the terrain around, maybe stop the Expanded Force boost of thanks to the Psychic Terrain, but no, it sets the rain up right now.
Yeah, I think you can go both ways with this, and I was certainly expecting, as you were, for the Misty Terrain to be the favourite route, i.e. going for the Max Starfall, but deciding to go for the rain there, I think that's somewhat a good decision for for Muffrey because it does make sure he's got that option for those really strong Aqua Jets later in the game. Of course, you also want Misty Terrain to be lasting as long as... you don't want to be setting up Misty Terrain necessarily while you have an Amoonguss as part of your game plan. So a little bit of a mixed bag there as to what you go for.
Very true. And talking about Amoonguss, we actually see the Rage Powder coming out. And right after that, we saw the male Indeedee go for the Expanded Force and bring the Amoonguss down to its Focus Sash then. Whilst the Max Starfall actually does come out this time round. Turn 2 of the Dynamax Azumarill is enough to pick up the KO onto that Sleeping Porygon Z, which does take a fall right now. It does blow up into a huge amount of fireworks displayed in front of us on Flavio's end. Does set the Mystic Terrain up as well, so no more sleeps, at least for now. And forcing Flavio into bringing his own Amoonguss.
Yeah, Amoonguss coming back onto the field is a good choice for Flavio. Certainly by that, you'd assume it would have access to maybe one of its grass or poison attacks that'll do quite a bit of damage to Azumarill and make sure that it's going down. The question I've got for Muffrey is, what is the last Pokemon in the back? If it is that Marowak, he's going to be in quite a good position now, being able to have removed the Psychic Terrain from the field. Now the Expanding Force will only hit one target, so the Indeedee likely switching out to reset that later down the line in favour of bringing in Clefairy and making that Amoonguss on Flavio's side even more bulky.
Just like you said it, the Indeedee does want to bring the Psychic Terrain once again. We actually see a Protect coming up from the Amoonguss this time round. Whilst I think the Amoonguss on Flavio's end was trying to pick up a KO onto its nemesis on the other side of the field. Whilst Max Geyser critical hit, boosted by the rain, is enough to pick up a KO onto that Clefairy, which is world-renowned on its bulkiness, which is absolutely insane. So the critical hit may have mattered. It depends, because Azumarill does benefit from an ability called Huge Power, which does double its attack stat. Especially in the rain, Max Geyser, huge damage. And with that being said, the Azumarill does undynamax now, and the male Indeedee once again brings the Psychic Terrain.
It does, and it's going to be quite difficult for Muffrey now. It doesn't matter what he's got in the back, that Psychic Terrain is still prevalent on the field, and of course Psychic Terrain will protect Flavio's side of the field from any Aqua Jets. So this Azumarill going to have to take at least one attack before it can attack itself again, and depending on what item is on the Indeedee on Flavio's side of the field, not necessarily going to be able to pick up a knockout, especially through that Rage Powder, unless Azumarill is holding something a little bit left field like safety goggles.
Yeah, exactly. And with that being said, we're actually just seeing the expanding force being able to, of course, pick up the KO onto the Amoonguss because it was at 1 HP, but dealing good amounts of damage onto that Azumarill. The Azumarill is confirmed not to have Sap Sipper, so it more than likely is going to be Huge Power, because we do see the Spore coming out from Flavio's Amoonguss, putting it to sleep, being faster than it as well, we should duly note. And the Azumarill does suffer its first guaranteed sleep turn, whilst its partner in crime, Alolan Marowak, does come onto the field.
It certainly does, and Amoonguss being a little bit faster than what you'd expect is something that Flavio is well known for, something he used in the 2019 season to pilot his way all the way to the finals and eventually win the European International Championships of that season. So, no real surprise here that maybe the Amoonguss is slightly faster than what you'd expect. And it's going to be very difficult for Muffrey now to come back. He's going to have to deal with that Indeedee launching out those big expanding forces. Of course, the Azumarill is likely to go down from any attack that comes out, whether it's from the Amoonguss or from the Indeedee. Marowak's going to have to attack a few times in order to knock out that Amoonguss now that the rain is on the field. Muffrey knows that. He's gone for the forfeit here, and that will be your set 2 Pado.
That will be your set 2 Pado indeed, being able to display why Turbo Fungo, aka Turbo Shroom, is able to be really good right there in the end of the day. Being able to just spore things, maybe try to get a boost, and just position itself really good. I think overall, Flavio, was able to control the tempo very, very well. And he displayed it overall during both games on top of that, because he was trying to say, listen, Muffrey, you have, of course, the choice of going for Trick Room. What I need to do is try to shut that strategy down as best as I can. And he was able to do that, I think, overall, wasn't he, Ben?
It definitely was. And also you see this sort of dynamic about a really offensive team, probably not trained that defensively at all, having all of these tools. So, what beats a really fast, frail offensive team? Well, one of the ways is Trick Room. Well, we saw how Flavio decided to shut that down. The other way that they tend to do that is by making sure that their opponent isn't attacking. Well, you saw examples of that with Porygon and how much offensive power that has. And the third way is to say, hey, look, I've got my really offensive, fast, frail Pokemon that does lots and lots of damage, but you can't hit it because I've got some redirection going on, I've got some fake out going on. And that, again, we saw an example of that. So all of those different methodologies for making a fast, frail, offensive team actually function, stay on the front foot, and able to close out games is exactly what we saw here from Flavio.
Yeah, 100%. I think it was just, he was able to control the complete tempo of it. Muffrey was trying on his end to try to do what he could to better position himself. But unfortunately for himself, he wasn't able to. He brought some really interesting Pokemon. That Azumarill I really liked. I think that it could have done a lot of work as well. But regardless, unfortunately for himself, he's going to have to take the loss, whilst Flavio is able to get the win for Italy versus Sweden. Ladies and gents,